There's a unique kind of heartbreak that comes when the people we trusted the most, the ones we were supposed to be able to lean on, become the very reason we fall. Betrayal by family is not just a wound, it's a shattering. It messes with your sense of identity, it makes you question your worth, and worse, it can leave you wondering if love is even real. When betrayal comes from outside, we call it pain. But when it comes from the inside, from blood, from kinway, call it devastation. I want to speak to the part of you that still feels stuck. The part that wonders if you're allowed to hurt this much. You are. And the part that questions if you'll ever trust again. You will. But first you have to give yourself permission to feel what you've buried. Betrayal is never easy, but when it comes from family, the people we're taught are supposed to be our first safety net it stings in a way that's hard to describe. It doesn't just feel like a personal attack. It feels like the earth under your feet cracked wide open. These are the people you were told would protect you, stand with you, love you unconditionally. So when they become the very source of pain, it creates a fracture in your emotional foundation. You start to question everything. Was it ever real? Did they ever see me? Do I even matter? And that kind of pain doesn't just go away. It settles in your bones, shows up in your relationships, and can even distort your sense of worth. The betrayal becomes a whisper in your head, making you doubt your instincts, your memories, your value. It isn't about holding a grudge, it's about facing a reality that feels unbearable. The people who were supposed to be home became the storm. That contradiction shakes your identity. And the truth is, no one prepares you for the ache that comes when family chooses to wound you instead of protect you. When betrayal comes from the outside world, friends, coworkers, acquaintances, there's usually a way to process it logically. We can say, well, maybe they didn't know me, or they weren't obligated to love me. But when betrayal comes from inside the house, there's no script for that. There's only silence, confusion, and a deep inner wound that doesn't stop bleeding just because time passes. We're wired for connection, and that wiring begins with family. When that connection is corrupted, it doesn't just break your heart. It breaks your sense of trust in the world. And that's what makes healing so layered. You're not just healing from what happened. You're healing from what should have happened but didn't. The hugs you didn't receive. The words they should have said but never did. The protection you begged for but were denied. It's grief compounded by confusion. The betrayal isn't just about what they did, it's also about what they failed to do. That absence becomes just as loud as the action. You carry it, you replay it. You wonder if you're being dramatic or disloyal for feeling it this deeply. But let's get one thing straight. Just because someone shares your DNA doesn't mean they're automatically safe. We've been conditioned to believe that family equals love, support, loyalty, but not all families offer those things. Some offer criticism disguised as tough love. Others offer neglect, abuse, manipulation, and then call it tradition. And when you start to wake up to this reality, when your gut starts whispering, something isn't right here, it's terrifying. Because admitting the truth about your family can feel like betraying them, even though they were the ones who betrayed you. You begin walking this painful tightrope between loyalty and self-preservation. And let's not ignore the shame that comes with even thinking those thoughts. Society tells us that talking about family betrayal is taboo. So instead of naming it, we hide it. We internalize it. We silence ourselves. That silence turns into a cage, and that cage convinces us we're alone in this. But you're not. So many people carry invisible bruises from people they were taught to honor, to obey, to love no matter what. And it takes immense courage to name that wound for what it really is, betrayal. The hardest part? It doesn't always come in loud, obvious ways. Sometimes betrayal is quiet. It's the parent who watched you cry and walked away. It's the sibling who stood by while others tore you down. It's the silence after you voiced your pain. It's being gaslit into thinking your emotions are too much, your boundaries are too rigid, your needs are too inconvenient. Betrayal from family often comes wrapped in denial, justification, and spiritual guilt. They might say they love you, but love without accountability is not love, it's control. And as much as it hurts to say that out loud, it's also the beginning of liberation. Because once you call betrayal what it is, you start reclaiming your voice. You start seeing clearly. You stop making excuses for people who should have protected you. The clarity hurts, but it also heals. Betrayal by family isn't just a chapter in your story, it's a turning point. The moment you begin to see yourself not as broken, but as someone who survived something incredibly difficult and chose to rise anyway, that rise doesn't have to be loud or polished. Sometimes it's just you whispering, "This hurt me," and that's enough. That's where healing begins. There's a kind of grief. No one talks about the grief of what never existed, but should have. It's the empty chair at the table, the hug that never came, the "I'm proud of you" that stayed locked behind clenched lips. When family betrays you, you're not only dealing with the wound of what happened, you're mourning the dream of what you always believed should happen. That version of family you held in your heart, the safe, kind, nurturing versions, quietly. And yet, the world rarely gives you permission to grieve it. People will tell you to be strong, to forgive, to let it go. But how can you let go of something you never had the chance to fully hold? That grief is legitimate. That ache you feel is not a weakness. It's the sign of a heart that hoped deeply, a heart that wanted to be loved the way it deserved. When you're grieving what should have been, you're not being dramatic. You're being honest. And that honesty is the bravest first step toward healing. Because pretending you weren't hurt doesn't make you stronger. Grieving the loss of an imagined love allows you to reclaim your truth. Grief isn't always loud or visible. Sometimes it hides in the way you tense up during family holidays, the way you hesitate before sharing a vulnerable story, the way you quietly envy others who seem to have the support you craved. It can feel like sadness wrapped in shame, like mourning something you were never officially allowed to lose. But grief doesn't follow rules. It doesn't require permission. It simply demands to be felt. And when you're grieving what should have been, you're navigating a loss that has no ceremony. There's no funeral for unspoken love, no memorial for the childhood you deserved. And yet, the pain is real. It lingers in the corners of your life, sometimes showing up when you least expect it. Like when a friend's parent speaks kindness and your heart cracks open a little. Or when someone asks you about your family and you pause, wondering how to respond without unraveling. This grief is invisible, but it's weighty. And the only way to move through it is to stop minimizing it, to stop pretending that what you lost doesn't matter just because it was never fully there to begin with. One of the most difficult aspects of this kind of grief is the internal confusion it creates. You start asking questions like, was I too sensitive? Or maybe I expected too much. But those are survival questions. They're your mind's attempt to make sense of the void. Because if you can blame yourself, maybe the pain becomes more manageable. But here's the truth. It wasn't too much to want to feel safe in your own home. It wasn't too much to want to be hugged, protected, respected, believed in. These were not extravagant wishes. They were emotional necessities. And grieving them is an act of self-validation. You are naming what was missing. You are giving yourself the acknowledgement you never received. That's not self-pity. That's self-awareness. And that awareness can be uncomfortable because it uncovers layers we've spent years burying. It forces us to sit with feelings we were never taught how to hold. But in that discomfort, there's truth. And in that truth, there's the beginning of something softer, something like compassion for the younger version of yourself who just wanted to feel loved. There's also guilt that creeps in when you start grieving the family you never had. A voice inside might whisper, but they did their best, or other people had it worse. And while those statements might hold some truth, they don't erase your experience. Grief doesn't operate on a comparison chart. Your pain doesn't become invalid just because someone else endured something different. You are allowed to mourn what your heart needed and didn't receive. You are allowed to feel disappointed, angry, hurt, even betrayed, and you're allowed to feel those things without rushing to forgiveness or justification. Because grief, when given space, teaches you how to see clearly. It allows you to separate the illusion from the reality, the hope from the harm. And it offers you the chance to become the nurturer you never had to show up for yourself with tenderness and care. But that only happens when you stop dismissing your own loss. When you say, that mattered, that absence shaped me. You're not clinging to pain, you're honoring your truth. And in a world that often encourages us to numb out, that is a radical act of courage. There's a narrative we've been fed since childhood that says being a good person means always being available, always forgiving, always showing up, no matter how many times someone crosses your boundaries. Especially when it comes to family, we're taught that love should be unconditional and that protecting ourselves is somehow a betrayal of that love. But let's get honest. When the people who are supposed to love you the most are also the ones who damage your spirit, something has to change. Protecting your peace is not a betrayal. It's a reclamation. It's you finally recognizing that your nervous system matters, your mental clarity matters, the way you feel after a conversation, after a visit, after a text, that matters. If you walk away from those interactions feeling small, confused, or depleted, that is your body and soul telling you the truth. Peace is not some luxury reserved for people with perfect families. It is your birthright. And protecting it, even if it means saying no to people you once said yes to your whole life, is an act of deep self-respect. It's common to feel a pang of guilt the first time you decide to say, I can't do this anymore. It might come when you decline a phone call, skip a gathering, or stop replying to the manipulative messages that always end in guilt trips. That guilt is not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's the residue of an old pattern. One where you were expected to absorb everything, stay quiet, and smile through pain. It's what happens when your role in the family has been one of emotional caretaker or peacekeeper. But here's the hard truth. That role was never sustainable. You weren't built to carry everyone else's emotional weight at the cost of your own. Peace doesn't come from avoiding conflict. It comes from being willing to face discomfort in service of your own well-being. When you choose peace, you may disrupt old dynamics. You may be labeled difficult, distant, or even cold, but those labels are just projections. They are not your truth. Your truth is that you're learning to value your inner world enough to stop letting it be polluted by chaos disguised as love. Choosing peace sometimes means being misunderstood by people who benefit from your silence. It means walking away from conversations where your boundaries are twisted into accusations. It means refusing to be gaslit into thinking your clarity is cruelty. That kind of strength often looks like distance, but it's actually presence with yourself. You begin to notice what it feels like when your nervous system isn't in fight or flight. You breathe deeper. You sleep better. You laugh from your belly instead of your throat. And for the first time, you start to believe that maybe peace was meant for you all along. You begin to ask better questions. What makes me feel safe? Who respects my no? What spaces allow me to show up fully without shrinking? And these questions open doors, not always easy ones, but necessary ones. Doors that lead to a life that isn't dictated by obligation, guilt, or fear, but by intention. A life where your emotional safety is not negotiable. A life where your joy isn't conditional. Protecting your peace doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough to stop setting yourself on fire, to keep other people warm. It means you're finally drawing a line and saying, this is where I end and you begin. It means choosing to live in truth, even if it means stepping into unknown territory alone. And it means allowing yourself to rest, not just physically, but emotionally, to rest from defending your boundaries, to rest from constantly explaining your choices, to rest from carrying the emotional responsibility for people who refuse to carry it for themselves. And as you create that space, your peace becomes a quiet, sacred rebellion. It grows stronger. It anchors you. It becomes the home you never had, but always deserved. And that peace doesn't ask for perfection. It simply asks that you stop betraying yourself in the name of family. Because there is no greater love than choosing yourself after years of being taught not to. And that choice, that's where peace begins to bloom. Grief isn't always about what we lost. Sometimes it's about what we never had to begin with. The mother who never protected you, the father who never saw you, the sibling who used your vulnerability as ammunition, the family dynamic that never felt like home. And what makes this grief so complicated is that it doesn't come with the rituals that more visible losses do. There's no funeral for the emotional safety you crave but never got. No sympathy cards for growing up in survival mode. You're left trying to name a grief that no one else seems to acknowledge, and that kind of loneliness runs deep. But it is real. Grieving unmet needs is an act of truth-telling. It's not about blaming or staying stuck in the past. It's about honoring your reality. It's about sitting with the pain of what could have been, what should have been, and allowing yourself to feel it without shame. You don't have to justify it. You don't have to compare it to someone else's pain. You just get to feel it. Because grieving doesn't make you weak or ungrateful. It makes you honest. And that honesty is the first step toward healing. There's a particular ache that comes from watching others receive what you longed for. You see your friends calling their parents just to talk. You see families laughing without tension, sharing space without walking on eggshells. And while you're happy for them, there's this quiet sting that creeps up behind your smile. It's not jealousy, it's grief. The grief of realizing you never got to feel that kind of safety, that kind of love, that kind of ease. And even as an adult, that child inside you still waits shopping that one day your family will become what you needed all along. That one day the apology will come. That one day the roles will reverse and someone will finally take care of you. But healing begins when you stop waiting for that day. When you let go not of the hope for love, but